The views, information, and opinions expressed during the following program are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent the views of Access Communications, its representatives, or its employees.
Welcome to Planting Seeds, Philanthropy in Saskatchewan, a show where we aim to connect you to the community impact that's being powered by donors and charities across the prairies. I'm your host, Victor Roman, with the South Sask Community Foundation. I hope you enjoy the show. Today I'm joined by Fran Moran, who's actually the Community Relations Manager here at Access Communications. And we have a bit of a special episode. We're actually going to be talking a bit about Access itself and the Access Children's Fund, which has been helping kids since 1992. So I guess first off, welcome Fran. Can you let us know a little bit about yourself and your background with the Access Children's Fund?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Vic. So I'm the Community Relations Manager here at Access. I'm also one of the ambassadors for the Children's Fund. So I started here in 2020. I've also been roped in to become a TV bingo host, which is a ton of fun. But my background with the charity is very much that, being an ambassador, making sure that we're raising the awareness for the charity and really talking about the great work that the charity is doing. One
of the main things for me to ask right up front is, what is the purpose of this fund? I mean, there's a key word in the name that will tell me it's for children, but kind of deeper than that, like what are you looking to give at? What are you looking to, I guess, enhance for children within the province?
That's a great question. I think the charity itself has a pretty simple mandate, and it's that every child deserves a chance. So the fund is specifically geared towards children at risk or in need in the communities that Access serves, which are exclusively in Saskatchewan. So the charity focuses on three pillars of need. One's health and wellness, another is education and literacy, and then the third one is social inclusion for children from diverse backgrounds. So what we do is we solicit applications from other nonprofits and charities who are running programs that directly support those children. And in one of those three categories. It's a great program. I mean, it really is making a difference in the lives of children at risk or in need in Saskatchewan.
That's awesome. And I guess an obvious question too for, if there's someone that's hearing this and they might be from an organization that could apply or might be eligible, is how do they apply?
Yeah, please apply. myaccess.ca/children's fund has everything they're going to need.
Perfect.
They can also send us an email at childrensfund@myaccess.coop. But the landing page has everything. It's got the application criteria. It has the deadlines. We run our applications quarterly before they're put before a allocations committee and board. And it also dives into examples of other charities that we've given money to.
That's great. So I know you mentioned all of the communities that Access serves. I'm not going to get you to list those communities because I imagine that's a very long list. But what's a scope? What is the range of communities? Like how far north do we go, for example? Or what are some key communities that maybe that you see a lot of funding coming in for?
Oh, one of my favorite hobbies is listing our 235 communities alphabetically. So I could have asked, but as far north as La Ronge and Eronge, as far east as Maple Creek, we're in Mooseman. So we have coverage throughout the province. It's not just limited to those communities, though. It's also any areas that Access serves. We also serve 200,000 square kilometers of rural areas in the province. So for smaller communities, for groups that are trying to run something within a local school, we can absolutely support. It's just a matter of being a community that Access has some support or involvement in.
That's awesome. And that regional reach, really just speaking to me, is huge. We're the South Sask Community Foundation, so we technically serve kind of Davidson South. Sometimes there's exceptions to that as well, but there's so many of the smaller communities around where there aren't that many funding opportunities. And I can even say to some of the funds that we hold, there's some that kind of say, like there's one that's for Regina, there's one for Moose Jaw, And that starts to limit for the ones that, you know, someone from a small place like Weyburn or Carlisle or Stoughton can actually look at applying for. So it's nice to know that this is another option for those communities.
Yeah, and part of the advantage that we have being tied directly to Access Communications is we have all these mediums and channels to bring awareness of this charity as well. We can get in front of customers that are in Lashburn and Maidstone and North Battleford and say, have you heard about this fund? Do you know a charity or a nonprofit that would qualify? So it really does make a difference throughout the province. And yeah, it is far-reaching. It's really interesting because our board and our allocations committee also comes from all over the province.
Oh, okay.
And that helps keep a balance of, are we helping as many different communities and regions as we can?
That's great, to make sure there's a familiarity with the regions. So can you tell me a bit about that? Because that was something I was wondering, like I don't know how far into it you can go, but like how are the grants assessed as far as when applications come in? Yeah,
so we've got a quarterly application period where applications are sent in. Sometimes they come in incomplete, or sometimes we have some follow-up, and our admin team takes care of that. They look after the application and make sure it's board ready.
Yeah.
From that stage and following the cutoff deadline, it gets in front of our allocations committee. So our allocations committee is a group of, you know, folks that are really tied into the nonprofit sector. And they are, again, from around the province, represented from L'Orange, representatives from Southern Saskatchewan, and they look at these and give a recommendation to our board. Our board ultimately makes the approval on whether funding is allocated or denied or deferred. Sometimes the timing might not be right, or we need additional information, or are looking for some missing components of the application. We encourage them to apply again.
Yeah.
But that's generally the process. Our allocations committee will look at these, provide a recommendation, and then our board approves them.
The one thing I kind of heard you, I think during the process, and I want to know a little bit more about, is you mentioned that, you know, if someone's applying that, sorry, maybe I'm misremembering what I heard, but is it right to say that like you guys kind of help out a little bit in the application process, or what does that look like? Like, how can an organization expect to interact throughout the application process? Do you help them if you see something that's not quite right, or get back to them if there's something that you feel like they missed information, anything like that?
Yeah. Let me talk a bit about that. With a lot of these organizations, their mandate, their raison d'etre is to do good work in the community, right? The funding, the administrative, the record keeping, those components may not be their area of expertise. They may not be, this could in many cases be the first time they've applied for a grant or a fund. So they may have a really good idea, and they may have a really good cause and program they're trying to get off the ground, but they may not have completely fleshed it out. Or they may not have provided some key details that our board needs to know to make an approval, like the finances behind it. We try to avoid directly paying like administrative salaries, as just to pull an example. And that's because it's our funding isn't guaranteed. It can't be the way a program runs. We want to provide materials. We want to provide the funding for training and developing staff. We want to provide funding for builds and equipment, things that will outlast a possible lack of funding in the future. But that's what I mean by we're assisting. We're trying to guide folks who don't always have an expertise in sourcing funds on how to do it properly. One, so that they can have the best chance at getting an approval on the funding, but two, to kind of build that knowledge as well for when they apply to other funds. Yeah,
this is something we might have to talk about after the show, because this is something that we talk about a lot, is just, how can we make the writing process more and more accessible? Because as you said, like really the goal at what we're trying to do is community impact. And just because someone might be running an incredible program, and just because they don't have incredible grant writing skills doesn't mean that they shouldn't be able to get funding. And So I really appreciate hearing, I guess, how involved the organization is with charities to make sure, as you said, getting things board ready. I know at our foundation, kind of once a window is open, I'm very limited in what I will tell people or what we will tell people, just to make sure there's like a fair process. But those things are always things that we keep in mind too, is like, if a question keeps coming up or there's information that we think would be really beneficial for everyone to know, like, let's try to make it more available up front so that anybody applying can get it. But one of the other things that, as you mentioned, there might be a charity that's applying for, it might be their first grant ever. And sometimes when you're reading those, you can kind of tell. And I was even saying to another guest in another episode that, there was one grant that came in and we just had a hunch like the impact would have been there. But based on, this was through a federal program, so we didn't have really the flexibility we would internally. We couldn't go back and just talk to them and say like, can you resubmit this or anything like that. So it was a bit sad because we read this thing and we're like, it just feels like they didn't maybe know how to write the grant, but it feels like this funding, if they would have written a grant that we could have approved, could have been used in really good ways. So I just want to say, like, I appreciate the fact that the Children's Fund reaches out that way. And I think just in the charitable sector, in the, I guess, the grant making sector, the ones who are giving out the funding, that's something for us to be really mindful of, is just how can we invite people in and make it non-intimidating and help them express what they're doing to the best of their knowledge, right? So then that the people that are assessing are also the best equipped to know what they're actually trying to fund.
It's a bit of a pendulum swing though, because do you make your application extremely rigid and outlined and detailed and scare off a potentially strong applicant because they don't have all these details already, right? Or do you make it a little bit more free form and open, and then have this sort of imbalanced field when there's expertise and there isn't expertise? What we do is not write the application for folks, but we will guide them through, it's important to include your budgets if you've got one. We noticed a couple things were missing from this application. You may want to consider going back and putting that together. And they say, oh, right, we have that. We just didn't think it was relevant to this form. And then they include it. And it's a more robust, fully fleshed out application.
You mentioned that they're really like special projects, not necessarily one-time projects, but they're not the core operational funding that people are applying for their organizations. Is there a limit to like how many times an organization can apply? Like whether if I had one project, can I apply for that project year over year? Do I have to apply for a different project each year? What are there limitations around that?
We're always reviewing these rules and trying to do what makes sense for the applicants that are coming through. Currently, we have a 3-year rule, so we'll support an initiative 2 years in a row, but in the 3rd year, we ask for a bit of a break, and just for the sole reason of, a big part of our ability to fund comes from a big variable in TV bingo. And so if that money isn't there year after year after year, could your program sustain without having that funding? We don't want to grow a dependency. What we want to do is kick off and launch programs that can have a lasting impact. So we do have that 3-year rule in place right now. And we do ask organizations to take a break in that 3rd year.
Okay, you mentioned TV bingo, which kind of hinted to something I wanted to ask, so I'll ask it now, which is, where does the money for the fund come from? How does the fund grow? Does it grow year over year? Like, what's the fundraising methods for the fund?
Yeah, that is a great question. So for the Children's Fund, there are 3 primary fundraising initiatives. The first and the biggest one is TV Bingo. It's our charitable gaming program on Access Now TV, broadcast throughout the province across 100 communities. And honestly, you can play throughout the province beyond that on the Access Now app. It's our primary source of generating funds. The second is generous donations from individuals and groups. And the third, and most fun for us, is Access employee fundraisers and initiatives that we do internally. They're fun for us. They're definitely not the biggest moneymaker, but even just recently, we had a art gala here at Access where we had some extra paintings that had just been hanging around, memorabilia, paintings and whatnot. We sold them internally to staff and generated a whopping $740.
But I mean, that's good though for employee morale and things like that. And sorry, this is a little bit of a sidestep, but just on that note, you say it's not the biggest fundraising initiative, but one of the things that I've witnessed, for context, actually like years ago, I worked for Access Communications for about 6 months. It's one of the most memorable jobs I've ever had. I still have so much contact with so many people that I worked with here. And it's things like that that make a difference though, is that, the Children's Fund exists, that you're doing these community initiatives. It really feels like you're part of the community. And I'll be honest, until I started with the South Sask Community Foundation, like the only other time I probably had that connection was with Access. And I think the Children's Fund and the culture that kind of builds around that is a big reason why.
It's, I started a month before the pandemic. So believe me, I had no choice but to stay. But I'll say this, and I'll say this for just about all of our staff, they could work many, many places. We've got a talented group of people here, and they choose to work at Access because of exactly what you said, that sense of involvement and community and the difference you're able to make day to day. There's a the things we do here have a bit of a lasting impact, but also reverberate throughout the organizations we're enamored with, the community, and the province as a whole. So it is a lot of fun. No 2 days are the same. Exhibit A today, but it is. We really do enjoy it, and the charity plays a big role in that. The Children's Fund is something our staff are proud of, but also leap to support. That comes right down to TV bingo again. Every single week, we've got volunteers from our staff pool, and that can include their family and friends that answer the phones on the bingo line every single week. So it's 100 some employees a year, every year since the program launched in 2006 to keep that thing going. And it's not a hard sell. You're talking to the happiest people in Saskatchewan, right? Like it's they're extremely excited to have won some money, but it does take a village, and Access has built a very strong village in that regard.
That's great. Regarding the kind of those impact and the things that really touch on people's heart, which, as you mentioned, as an employee, kind of just naturally touches on your heart and gives you a reason to be here, is what are some of the maybe impactful stories that you can recall when it comes to a charity getting funding from the Children's Fund?
Oh, there's been so many. We generally in an average year support 30 to 40 organizations at about a $300,000 a year level, and that money goes a long way. One that always sticks with me is the United Way of Regina. We supported their classroom libraries program. So the idea and the concept is a library for children who don't really always have access to books available there within the classroom. So they can check out books, they can take them home, they can read during quiet time. And they launched the one that we funded at St. Augustine School here in Regina, which was blocks away from where I grew up. The pictures and the thank yous that we got from those kids in the form of handwritten cards and whatnot were pretty impactful. It makes a difference, right? It's one thing to cut a check and send some money over, and it's another thing to watch that money and watch that funding grow into something bigger and a lasting impact, because we're working with organizations that support children. We really are investing in building in the future, and you hope that the impact of having those materials, down the road leads to some of these kids doing great things. Right? It really does make a difference.
That's exactly right. When you support kids in really so many ways, literacy is a huge way. It's if you support kids young and they've got that right kind of framework as they grow older, the chances of success in whatever way it is of life, of being, I don't know if like responsible citizen is the right way to go about it, but like a positively impacting citizen within their community. Things like that just build up that structure that they're used to that being part of their community, and they're used to getting from their community, and they're going to want to give to their community when they're older, when they're adults. And I know that's something that I've seen a lot with charities that work with children, and it's a no-brainer. And I know like literacy is a huge topic right now, of like something that really, I guess it doesn't really like threaten the future of children, but it is something that's in jeopardy. Is like, if you don't get those basic reading skills young, it's gonna not just impact your success in school going forward, it's gonna impact your success in life going forward. So a simple project like that, just it can make waves that are really even hard to quantify.
Yeah, it's you know, I had a 5-month tenure as a loan representative for United Way. And I know firsthand that grade 3 reading level is pivotal. If kids don't have that at that time, it has a seismic shift in their potential, their likelihood to finish high school, their likelihood to be incarcerated. Like it reverberates throughout your life. You know, and hearing you talk like in terms of like the skills you build as a young person, the other one that comes to mind is Caring Hearts. So this is a camp I had a personal involvement with, you know, 10 years back. I was a camp counselor for 10 years. It was a hilarious time in my life. But one of the camps I got involved with was Caring Hearts, a bereavement camp. So it's a camp for kids that have experienced a loss in their family. And it's not always a distant loss. It can sometimes be a pretty traumatic, pretty impactful loss to a family unit. And you know, I got brought in to sort of be the lighthearted color, the campy guy, but you get a firsthand look at what the work of a grief counselor and a trauma counselor has on kids at that age, as they're still even forming their concept of life and death. And so proud of the Children's Fund supporting the Caring Hearts counseling, the Caring Hearts camp through donation in December. We even got to present them that check at the Regina Pats Family Day game. And that is going to go directly towards the counseling services that are kind of the backbone of Caring Hearts. Right now, actually, this summer. So
that's fantastic.
It is great, because those are skills those kids are also going to need, right? Understanding how to cope with grief and loss and whatnot. And it just runs the gamut of the things that kids need. You know, it's literacy, but it's also wellness, and it's also understanding your kind of place in the world when coming from a diverse background. Like it runs a gamut, and a lot of that will tie into accessibility. And kids that are dealing with a long-term illness or something similar. It really does cover a broad spectrum of needs in this province.
Yeah, absolutely. Like when you talk, like really just those two stories, like you said, you know, reading is something that everyone needs, everyone experiences. Bereavement is something that like we hope that nobody ever experiences, but the reality is sometimes kids will, like you mentioned, they'll lose guardians, they'll lose siblings, they'll lose grandparents for sure. And like it's tough to think about, you know, how does a kid adjust in that period, especially just kind of when you were talking about that, I was just like thinking in my head, and this is a bit of a personal connection just recently, so I'll keep it vague, but like I have someone who was an old friend who just passed away. They had a 6-year-old daughter. That's one of the things I think about, is just like, what impact does that have? Like your whole world is just like taken beneath your feet, and you have to adjust your entire life to something completely new. You've got to find a new role model, really. You've got to find like reasons to care again, and like telling that to a 6-year-old, that's just wild to me. So a camp like that's actually equipped to start that process of like what's the healthy healing, what's the healthy way forward, it's just invaluable.
It builds resiliency in kids, and it teaches them the lesson early, which ties back to community and volunteering and being in it together. It teaches them the lesson of, you're not alone in this. You know, the anecdote I'll give you from that camp is you have a lot of kids that come in and they have this sense that or they've been dealing with it, you can tell for weeks or months or however recent the loss was of they're the kid that experienced this loss, right? It's, oh, don't bring it up, don't talk about it. And they're kind of dying to talk about it a little bit.
Yeah.
And then you put them in a situation and with a group of people that are experiencing a similar type of loss. And this light bulb goes off that says, oh, I'm not alone in this.
Yeah.
Oh, like there are other people that are going through this and there are supports in place. And yeah, and that's just one example of the kind of impact you can make with this kind of funding.
Yeah.
And I'm very proud of that one too. And it was a bit of a full circle moment for me as well.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. We are going to wrap up here pretty soon. I just wanted to touch on one other quick factoid, which is that over $3 million have been donated since 1992 to help kids all across Saskatchewan. And I heard you say that it was like around 300 to 400,000 that seem to be going out each year now. So like that 3 million number has probably got to be growing pretty quick as far as current day situations go, hey?
That's exactly it. I think, so the charity itself started in 1992 as the Cable Regina Fund. And then it absorbed the CK Children's Fund.
Yeah.
They asked us to. And then in 2000, it was renamed the Access Fund. So the Access Communications Children's Fund. What changed seismically in terms of what our impact was going to be was TV Bingo.
Oh.
TV Bingo launched in 2006 and it has grown. It actually skyrocketed, almost tripled in terms of the amount that was being raised during the pandemic. Everybody was home. Yep. Everybody was wanting to play some bingo. So we're expecting this to come back down and normalize a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, the impact of the last year alone, since I've been here, we went from 2 to 3 million.
That's wild.
And that's just a testament to the giving nature of this province, but also the, my former boss, Jim Dean, always said, there's one silver bullet left in gaming, and it is in fundraising, and it's charitable gaming. It still works, and we've got a fantastic crew that puts together TV Bingo. That's what's making the difference right now.
Perfect.
In terms of our fundraising ability.
That's great. Well, I'm glad to hear it's growing, and it's been great to chat with you today. And I'm glad, I'm hoping that people have learned a lot about the fund and just the amazing impact that they can also be a part of as well. So thank you.
Perfect. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning into the show today. If you want to learn more about how you can make an impact in your community, visit the South Sask Community Foundation at sscf.ca or find us online on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, or Spotify.
If you'd like to share your feedback on the program you just watched, contact us today.